the palace smiles were always too perfect. Behind every public appearance stood a buried resentment neither woman dared voice until now. When Catherine allegedly questioned Camilla's legitimacy behind closed doors, it ignited a royal firestorm years in the making. But was this confrontation just a personal vendetta or something far more dangerous? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. From the outside, the monarchy looked calm, polished, and obedient to tradition. Yet anyone who spent even a single day within those historic walls knew that something colder lingered beneath the surface. There had always been subtle signs, tiny cracks in the facade that hinted at tension between the two women, brief exchanges during engagements, a stiffness during joint appearances, the unmistakable way their eyes avoided lingering on each other for more than a heartbeat. Those who paid attention recognized it early. Catherine's effortless rise in public affection cast a long shadow over Camilla, whose acceptance by the British public had always been fragile, conditional, and painfully earned. As Catherine's influence grew, so did Camilla's unease. The palace could mask much, but it could not hide the way the nation increasingly viewed Catherine as the true stabilizing force of the monarchy, the future they trusted, and the symbol they admired. Behind the scenes, whispers circulated about a conversation that shifted everything. It wasn't loud. It wasn't public. It wasn't even meant to be known outside a locked room. Yet the echo of that exchange, Catherine quietly questioning whether Camilla's title was as secure as the palace claimed, sent shockwaves through corridors that had witnessed centuries of royal conflict. Staff who were present that weekend at Sandringham described the atmosphere as electric, the kind that makes even seasoned royal aides walk on eggshells. Hours after the alleged conversation, protocols changed. Senior staff were abruptly reassigned, communications officers were instructed not to acknowledge certain inquiries, and a noticeable tension settled over the family's winter retreat. Some staff members later admitted they felt they had witnessed the first tremor of a much larger earthquake. What made the incident even more explosive were the leaked fragments of correspondence that followed. Phrases like irregularities, inconsistencies, and unresolved questions appeared in private memos that were never meant for public scrutiny. Catherine, known for her calm temperament and deliberate actions, seemed to have developed these doubts over months, not days. Her concerns didn't appear impulsive or emotional. They looked researched, considered, and quietly validated. And once the rumors began circulating that insiders had long referred to Camilla's title as conditional, the narrative shifted dramatically. It was no longer Catherine versus Camilla. It was tradition versus truth, popularity versus precedent, the future queen versus the woman who had become queen under circumstances many still questioned. This was no simple disagreement. It was the surfacing of a fracture that had been forming long before anyone saw it. And as this hidden conflict deepened, it revealed a far more unsettling reality. Catherine's challenge wasn't just personal, it struck at the very architecture of royal legitimacy. But to understand why Catherine's challenge struck such a devastating chord, we must unravel the shadowy beginnings of Camilla's royal journey and the secrets that came with it. What if Camilla's title wasn't earned but negotiated? Royal insiders claim a clandestine pact ensured her rise, bypassing traditional royal protocols and public consent. Buried behind palace walls lies a paper trail, and Catherine may have uncovered more than anyone expected. There's a name the palace doesn't speak aloud anymore: the gentleman's agreement. A phrase loaded with secrets, signed in silence and cloaked in royal discretion. According to those close to the inner circle, it was a private arrangement forged between Charles and a select handful of advisors, long before the late Queen had passed. This wasn't a public endorsement, it was a strategic alignment, a deal to pave the way for Camilla's smooth ascension when the time came, without the burden of public scrutiny or parliamentary hurdles. It wasn't written into law, but it was treated as binding, an unspoken oath whispered behind gilded doors. When Queen Elizabeth offered her so-called blessing for Camilla's future title, it was, according to insiders, far more conditional than the public was ever told. That statement, so carefully worded and released at a time of national sentimentality, was later twisted into a permanent endorsement. But those who read between the lines knew better. The late Queen had made it clear Camilla's status was to be earned, not assumed. Her acceptance was tied to strict expectations, ones that were quietly shelved the moment Charles assumed the throne. The public never saw the back-channel arguments, the late-night negotiations, or the frantic redrafting of the palace's succession communications. In Catherine's hands, however, sat something far more damning: legal records surrounding Charles and Camilla's marriage that revealed obscure clauses and loopholes never made public. Catherine's review of the transition documents, initially meant to be ceremonial, reportedly left her visibly shaken. Within the archives were traces of hastily amended policies, last-minute reinterpretations of royal marital standards, and, most glaringly, a coronation preparation file marked Provisional Protocol, Spousal Roll, Subject to Review. The implications were staggering. It hinted that even at the time of planning, the palace wasn't certain how Camilla's role would be presented or protected. Sources claim that one memo explicitly referred to Camilla's status as a narrative adjustment designed for public consumption, a branding maneuver to secure the monarchy's image during a fragile period. In simpler terms, Camilla wasn't crowned out of entitlement, she was installed as part of a carefully orchestrated PR campaign. Her title, her role, even her visibility in key events, had been shaped by perception, not precedence. And when Catherine, armed with these revelations, began to ask the questions no one dared voice, it threatened to unravel years of deception. But Catherine wasn't just raising questions out of suspicion, she may have been reacting to a betrayal of the monarchy's very foundation. The term fraud isn't used lightly inside the firm, but sources say Catherine's private inquiry unearthed disturbing inconsistencies in Camilla's marriage timeline, and the implications could threaten the line of succession. What began as a quiet curiosity turned into a legal labyrinth no one was prepared for. Catherine, already unsettled by what she had learned about the so-called gentleman's agreement and the manipulated coronation documents, began asking deeper questions. Her focus shifted from titles to timelines, from public perception to private paperwork. And what she uncovered wasn't just procedural oversight, it was a potential breach of legal integrity at the highest level. Camilla and Charles's civil ceremony had long been considered a formality, a reconciliation of personal love and public duty. But when Catherine scrutinized the records, there were immediate red flags. Dates didn't align. Certain signatures appeared hastily added. One document had a notarization date that predated the filing of the actual license. It was subtle, but in the world of royal legitimacy, even the smallest anomaly casts a giant shadow. Catherine reportedly discovered evidence of retroactive amendments documents related to the marriage that had been quietly altered months, even years, after the ceremony had taken place. These amendments weren't flagged as updates or corrections. They were buried, folded into the administrative machinery of the monarchy, signed off by individuals no longer in their positions. When she traced the chain of approvals, several links were conspicuously missing. Catherine wasn't just dealing with sloppy paperwork. She was staring at what looked like a deliberate attempt to revise history without consequence. Then came the most damning revelation of all. A whistleblower, a retired notary who had once handled royal documentation, stepped forward in complete anonymity. Through back channels, Catherine was made aware of his claims that Camilla had not fully disclosed prior legal obligations from her first marriage issues that, if true, could have rendered her subsequent union invalid under church and state expectations. This wasn't just about Charles and Camilla's love story. This was about the constitutional framework underpinning the monarchy's public standing. If the second marriage was found to be technically flawed or incomplete in legal standing, every act derived from it, including Camilla's position, would be called into question. Faced with such volatility, Catherine did not act rashly. She consulted, in strictest confidence, with a constitutional law expert known for their discretion and deep ties to royal affairs. That meeting, sources say, lasted for over 4 hours. When Catherine left, she was pale, silent, and resolute. She knew the truth didn't just concern Camilla's past, It implicated the present and the future of the monarchy. The inheritance lines, the public trust, the symbolic unity of the crown, and worst of all, she knew this truth had been concealed intentionally. What began as a personal reckoning was now a legal and moral crisis. But the real shock came not from what Catherine uncovered, but how Charles responded when confronted. He slammed the door so hard it rattled centuries of tradition. When Catherine confronted Charles with her findings, it wasn't just a family argument, it was a constitutional earthquake. And from that moment, alliances across the monarchy began to fracture. It happened at Clarence House, behind doors that had witnessed everything from royal celebrations to private grief, but nothing quite like this. Charles had been briefed in advance, yet the sight of Catherine walking in with those documents in hand, eyes steady, voice composed, caught him off guard. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't accuse. She simply laid out what she had found. The altered timelines, the buried legal irregularities, the whistleblower's testimony, and the quiet confirmations from experts who knew exactly what those findings meant. And in that moment, the king didn't see his daughter-in-law, he saw a threat to the stability he believed he had secured. A threat to Camilla. A threat to the fragile narrative that had been so carefully constructed. One of the staffers stationed outside the room later described hearing raised voices unlike anything they'd ever heard inside the royal residence. The tone wasn't just defensive, it was explosive. Charles reportedly accused Catherine of disloyalty, of allowing paranoia to corrode her judgment, of weaponizing her popularity against the crown. His words were sharp, cutting, and full of fury. But Catherine did not retreat. One insider called her presence ice over fire. Controlled, but unshakable. She listened. She waited. And when Charles finally ran out of breath, she said only one thing. Truth isn't treason. What made the confrontation even more haunting was William's silence. He stood nearby, listening, but not speaking. His expression gave nothing away, yet those closest to the couple knew the weight of his quietude. He wasn't absent, he was absorbing. Judging, watching two forces he loved collide, knowing the fallout would be catastrophic either way. It wasn't just a breakdown in communication, it was a collapse of trust, between generations, between institutions, between power and principle. Camilla, who had been shielded from the initial storm, learned of the confrontation hours later. The news reportedly left her devastated. She withdrew from public view, cancelling appearances, avoiding cameras, and limiting even private interactions. Those who saw her in the days that followed said she looked shattered. The woman who had fought for decades to earn her place at Charles's side now saw it slipping through her fingers, not by scandal in the press, but by whispers in the palace. Behind the scenes, the royal press machine went into overdrive. Carefully worded statements were drafted, denying all allegations without ever naming them. The goal was simple: deflect attention, confuse the narrative, and present a united front. But it was too late. The rupture had already begun. The world didn't need confirmation. The silence, the tension, the sudden shifts in royal schedules, they all spoke louder than any denial ever could. But if Charles thought Catherine would back down, he miscalculated. What followed next left the monarchy gasping for air. Locked inside a discreet Kensington drawer was a confidential dossier one Catherine was never meant to read. Containing decades of restricted legal opinions and redacted memos, this file may have changed the course of royal history. It was a discovery made by accident, or so the story goes. Catherine had been reviewing logistical documents related to an upcoming international tour when she came across the unmarked drawer. At first glance, the file looked forgotten, tucked beneath layers of outdated stationery. But the moment she opened the manila folder stamped with a fading but ominous label, Operation Transcendence, everything changed. What lay inside was not merely sensitive, it was volatile. There were memorandums typed on aging paper, some bearing the royal seal, others branded with the signatures of past advisors who had long since vanished from public view. It was as if she had stumbled upon a vault of secrets buried in plain sight. The first document she examined had multiple lines blacked out, It was a legal brief offering constitutional analysis on the role of a non-traditional spouse and whether existing royal protocols could be adjusted in accordance with emotional reconciliation rather than public consensus. 3 separate advisory notes, each from high-ranking government legal officials, were heavily redacted, some containing entire paragraphs scribbled over with thick ink, accompanied by cryptic marginal notes. Avoid scrutiny, expedite under marital revision, and most damning of all, do not circulate beyond tier 1. The implications were chilling. It wasn't just that Camilla's position had been discussed. It had been manipulated through backdoor legal gymnastics, away from the public eye and beyond parliamentary oversight. Buried deeper in the file were email printouts, messages between top royal aides and high-level political intermediaries. The language was coded but unmistakable. Phrases like expedited inheritance paths and non-traditional legitimacy routes read like euphemisms, but the meaning wasn't lost on Catherine. These weren't just theoretical conversations, they were operational strategies. There was an undeniable effort to create a bypass, a workaround, a redefinition of what it meant to be queen, tailored specifically to fit Camilla. What followed for Catherine was reportedly an emotional breakdown behind closed doors. For hours, she didn't speak. Her aides found her motionless, eyes fixed on the last page in the folder, a sealed annex marked, "Internal use only, do not archive." She never spoke about the contents of that final document. But from that day forward, something in her shifted. She didn't destroy the file. She didn't bury it. She placed it back, locked the drawer, and gave no instruction for it to be removed. That silence, that deliberate choice not to erase what she had found, became its own act of defiance, a symbol that the truth could not be rewritten, not this time. Because that dossier, quiet, forgotten, and hidden in plain sight, held the key to unraveling the illusion. Its mere existence confirmed that Camilla's role had never been secure. It had been engineered, debated, and ultimately imposed. And now, with the knowledge in Catherine's hands, the monarchy would never be the same. As the dossier's contents leaked into the private inner circle, the royal family split into factions, each choosing a side in the growing war. As the palace imploded, all eyes turned to Prince William. But it was Princess Anne's stoic, unshakable, who shocked everyone. Her whispered support of Catherine turned a personal feud into a full-blown crisis of legitimacy. The royal family had weathered countless storms, but never one that pitted blood against blood with stakes this high. Inside the walls of Kensington and Clarence House, silence became its own language. William, once the image of clarity and conviction, was caught in a quiet agony. He loved his father, but he trusted his wife. And between those two loyalties stretched a fault line that had begun to crack. Those closest to William said he withdrew into himself, avoiding meetings, deflecting questions, and declining to make any definitive statement even in private. But his silence said more than words ever could. He didn't defend the monarchy. He didn't contradict Catherine's claims. He simply watched, listened, and waited. And in that stillness, others made their move. Princess Anne, known for her unflinching discipline and refusal to indulge in palace theatrics, broke character in a way no one expected. In a hushed conversation with a senior aide, later leaked through back channels, she reportedly stated that Catherine had every right to question what was handed down without consent. It was a simple sentence, but from Anne it was seismic. Her loyalty to the crown was unquestionable until now. The fact that she would even entertain Catherine's concerns sent shockwaves through the entire royal structure. For years, Anne had been a stabilizer, the unshakable spine of tradition. Now, she was no longer a bystander, she was a quiet ally to the woman threatening the entire system. Prince Edward, meanwhile, kept his distance. His statements were vague, his attendance at internal meetings sporadic. Sophie, once close to both Catherine and Camilla, reportedly felt torn. Her public smiles continued, but those around her noticed her sudden withdrawal from private engagements and her increasing preference for official duties abroad. Within the staff ranks, however, neutrality was becoming impossible. Whispers turned into murmurs, murmurs into coded conversations. The phrase Queen Catherine began surfacing, half joke, half prophecy. Junior aides would reference the people's verdict when reading social sentiment reports, noting that Catherine's approval ratings were surging, while Camilla's began to erode under public scrutiny. The palace, for all its opulence, could not insulate itself from the judgment echoing outside its gates. What frightened the palace most wasn't the public, it was the fear growing within. Internal security protocols, typically reserved for national emergencies or constitutional disruptions, were discreetly enacted. Background checks were rerun. Devices were reissued. Staff movements were monitored more closely. Loyalties were being questioned at every level. Who had access to what? Who was leaking information? And, more critically, who was ready to choose sides? The monarchy had always survived on the illusion of unity. But now that illusion was cracking. What began as a single confrontation had evolved into a cold civil war within the firm, with old alliances dissolving and new ones quietly forming in their place. And as the silence around William grew louder and Anne's rare rebellion drew deeper lines in the sand, the fear of collapse stopped being hypothetical. It started feeling inevitable. With tensions boiling, the palace had one final weapon to silence Catherine, and it came straight from Camilla's past. Camilla wasn't about to lose her crown without a fight. When an anonymous package reached Kensington, filled with compromising images and veiled threats, it was clear someone was willing to destroy Catherine to save Camilla. The envelope arrived without a signature, no return address, no warning, thick, weathered paper, a seal no longer in use. But what caught immediate attention was the name scrawled across the front in an unsettling flourish, Lady Rose's collection. To most, it would have meant nothing. But to those who knew, it referred to a long-defunct nickname once whispered among old aristocracy circles, used for private archives, containing the palace's most sensitive secrets. Catherine opened it in private. Inside, a stack of printed emails, blurry photographs, and loosely assembled documents that felt more like a trap than a threat. The contents weren't just targeted, they were curated to strike at the heart of her reputation. At the center was a series of suggestive correspondences between a man once affiliated with one of Catherine's earliest charities and an unnamed financial donor tied to foreign development grants. The implication was clear. Catherine had allegedly benefited indirectly and unknowingly from irregular donations that could be framed as influence peddling. The emails weren't damning on their own, but taken out of context, paired with ambiguous bank records and speculative annotations, they painted a portrait designed to raise questions rather than answer them. It was a weapon built not to expose the truth, but to manufacture doubt. And the envelope didn't stop at suggestion. It included a printed draft of a press release never sent, accusing members of Catherine's extended family of tax avoidance through shell foundations. The data was inconsistent, the sourcing thin, but the damage didn't need to be factual, it only needed to be loud. The threat was unmistakable. Back down, or be buried beneath a scandal of synthetic precision. The Royal Press Office, upon hearing of the contents, immediately went into crisis mode. A counter-narrative campaign was drafted within hours. Flattering headlines were pushed out. Social engagements were ramped up. The goal wasn't to fight the blackmail, it was to drown it before it ever reached public ears. But William was not interested in containment. When he saw the file, something broke. His fury was cold, calculated, and targeted. He demanded answers. He questioned the palace's internal security. He interrogated senior advisors, some of whom had remained neutral throughout the crisis until that very moment. And for the first time, he stopped defending the monarchy. Not out loud, but with every move he made. What infuriated him most wasn't the content, it was the betrayal it represented. The willingness to sacrifice character for control. Catherine, for her part, did not flinch. She held the file, looked at it once more, and handed it back to the aide who had delivered it. Her response was simple: let them try. And with that, she made her decision. She would not be silenced. Not by fear, not by fabrication, not even by the crown. The monarchy now stood on the edge of collapse, and what happened next would shock the world. She had remained silent for years, but this time, Catherine stepped forward, eyes steady, voice unwavering, and shattered centuries of silence. Her words were measured, but their impact? Absolutely seismic. The setting was deceptively ordinary. A charity event meant to highlight children's mental health, an annual engagement Catherine had attended countless times before. Cameras rolled, the audience smiled, and no one expected anything beyond the usual speech of empathy and goodwill. But from the moment she walked on stage, something in her presence had changed. This was not a consort performing royal duty. This was a woman standing at the edge of a battlefield, prepared to speak her truth, consequences be damned. She opened with warmth, thanked the organizers, praised the young people. But then she pivoted. And in that moment, everything shifted. "I've learned," she said slowly, "that silence, while sometimes necessary, can also be a form of permission. And there comes a time when not speaking becomes more dangerous than telling the truth." The room fell utterly still. It wasn't what she said, it was what she meant. To those watching carefully, the message was undeniable. Catherine wasn't just making a statement about charity work. She was making a statement about power, legitimacy, and deception. In her calm and composed tone, she challenged the very structure of the monarchy without ever naming names. But no one had to guess who she was addressing. Within minutes, the internet exploded. Number Catherine the Rightful began trending globally before she had even left the podium. Millions replayed her words, dissecting every phrase, every glance, every pause. Commentators, journalists, royal analysts all scrambled to interpret the subtext, and for once, they agreed. Catherine had spoken. And what she delivered was not a scandal, it was a reckoning. The palace's carefully controlled narrative unraveled at breathtaking speed. Public sentiment, already frayed by whispers and leaks, now shifted decisively. Where once there was doubt, now there was momentum. Catherine had emerged not just as a voice within the monarchy, but as a force capable of changing it. Former royal advisors, many of whom had remained neutral for decades, broke their silence in the days that followed. A respected constitutional scholar published an open letter calling for a formal inquiry into the legal path that had led to Camilla's coronation. The letter wasn't accusatory. It was procedural. But in that quiet professionalism lay a louder truth. The crown was no longer above questioning. It was now a subject of public review, and Catherine's voice had made that possible. Headlines no longer referred to her as the Duchess of Cambridge or the Princess of Wales. They called her the symbol of a new monarchy. Editorials painted her as the embodiment of modern integrity, the quiet strength standing against a decaying order. Even foreign leaders, usually cautious in matters of another nation's monarchy, offered carefully worded praise for her courage. She hadn't demanded a crown, she hadn't asked for titles, but in speaking out, Catherine had claimed something far more powerful: moral authority. And just when it seemed the storm couldn't grow darker, the crown was forced into a decision that would redefine history. The ruling came not with fanfare, but with a whisper from within the palace. After weeks of escalating scandal, the monarchy released a statement that would change the institution forever. Camilla's title was altered. It began with an early morning briefing. No press conference, no televised address. Just a single line slipped into a formal bulletin from Buckingham Palace. Her Majesty the Queen Consort shall henceforth be styled Princess Consort under revised constitutional guidance. For those unfamiliar with royal semantics, it seemed minor. For those who understood, it was monumental. It was a retraction dressed as clarification, a quiet demotion packaged as a dignified transition, and it confirmed what so many had begun to suspect: Camilla's position had never been secure. It had been granted by maneuver, not by mandate. And now, with Catherine's shadow looming over the monarchy's moral compass, the palace had made its choice. The silence that followed was as deafening as the announcement itself. Just days later, Catherine appeared at a state ceremony in full ceremonial regalia, her posture regal, her presence unshakable. She said nothing. She smiled only faintly. But her appearance, her calm and undeniable authority spoke louder than any address could have. The message was clear. She hadn't seized power. She had inherited it from a system that could no longer ignore the truth. She hadn't asked for recognition. It had come to her because there was simply no one else left who could carry the crown's fractured credibility forward. Inside the palace, the cost of this shift was already being counted. Charles, once seen as the monarch who would finally steady the post-Elizabethan era, was said to be in visible decline. Advisors noted his retreat from official duties, his absence from key briefings, and his decision to postpone several engagements indefinitely. Those close to him whispered of sleepless nights and increasing frustration with the institution he had waited his entire life to lead. But what haunted him most wasn't the public's response. It was the realization that even within the palace walls, loyalty had shifted. Quietly, irrevocably, William, long perceived as the bridge between tradition and reform, stepped into a role even he hadn't fully anticipated. Under advisement from senior constitutional experts, he began exercising powers typically reserved for a reigning monarch during periods of health crisis. The move wasn't publicized, but it was happening behind closed doors. William was steering the ship, Catherine at his side, not as a figure of ceremony, but as the spine of the new monarchy. The crown, once clutched tightly by an older generation, was being redefined in real time. Historians have already named it. They call it the Windsor Reset, a moment where legacy bent to necessity, where tradition bowed to truth. Camilla, once the central figure in a bitter battle for legitimacy, quietly withdrew from public life. Her final statement, read by a palace aide, spoke of health, family, and a desire to serve in quieter ways. No interviews, no appearances. Just silence, one final attempt to preserve dignity in the face of undeniable defeat. But even with Camilla sidelined and Catherine victorious, one question still haunts the palace halls. What other secrets lie buried, and who will expose them next? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We will see you in the next one.